You hear thunder before you see the storm. You look up. The sky is darkening. The air suddenly feels different. Then the light comes. For a fraction of a second, the entire landscape turns white. You do not have a hospital nearby. You do not have a phone. You do not even know what electricity is. You are an ancient human standing outside during a thunderstorm. And then lightning hits. Today, lightning still kills people. Between 1989 and 2018, the United States recorded an average of 43 lightning deaths every year. But about 90% of people struck by lightning survive, with injuries ranging from minor to permanently disabling. That creates a strange question. If lightning can stop a human heart today, what would happen to an ancient human who had no doctor, no defibrillator, and no understanding of what had just happened? The answer is more complicated than simply dying instantly. And to understand why, you first have to understand what lightning actually does to your body. The first second A lightning strike is not the same as touching a giant electrical wire. Medical researchers have found that lightning can injure the body through several different pathways. A person can receive a direct strike, a side flash from a nearby object, or an electrical current traveling through the ground. The electrical event itself can be incredibly powerful. One medical review notes that lightning can involve currents reaching more than 200,000 amperes. Yet the electrical pulse through the body can last only around 2 milliseconds. That tiny duration changes everything. Instead of all that energy simply cooking your body from the inside, much of the current can travel across the outside of the body in a phenomenon called flashover. Experimental work has found that around 98–99% of the current can travel through the discharge channel during a flashover. That is one reason some people survive something that sounds impossible. But survival does not mean walking away unharmed. Lightning can interfere with the heart. It can disrupt the nervous system. It can cause burns, muscle injury, hearing problems, neurological symptoms, and blunt trauma from the explosive force of the strike. And sometimes, the most important evidence appears on the skin. In 1777, German physicist Georg Christoph Lichtenberg described strange branching electrical patterns. Today, these temporary fern-like marks are known as Lichtenberg figures. They can appear after lightning exposure and may disappear within hours or days. Imagine seeing those patterns on the body of someone from your group. You have never seen electricity. You have never seen a machine generate a shock. You have never heard the word cardiac arrest. You only know that the sky flashed, the ground shook, and the person beside you suddenly collapsed. And this is where the ancient world becomes much harder to reconstruct. We have no prehistoric diary describing the first person who survived a lightning strike. No cave painting can tell us exactly what a hunter thought when lightning hit a companion. No fossil can simply say, this person was struck by lightning. So we have to separate what we know from what we can only reconstruct. Archaeology can tell us that humans were already living with natural fire hundreds of thousands of years ago. At Barnham in Suffolk, England, researchers found evidence of deliberate fire dating to about 415,000 years ago, probably involving early Neanderthals. That matters because lightning was not merely a terrifying flash in the sky. It was also one of nature's ways of creating fire. And once humans learned to control fire, storms became part of a much larger survival problem. Because the real question is not what ancient humans thought lightning was. It is what happened when the sky suddenly became dangerous, and the only people who could save you were the people standing beside you. The person on the ground may not be dead. That is one of the strangest facts about lightning injuries. In modern medicine, researchers have documented people who suffered cardiac arrest after lightning and later recovered. In 2018, a case report described a 36-year-old man who suffered an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest after a lightning strike and regained circulation after about 50 minutes. You would have no way of knowing that in a prehistoric landscape. You would see someone collapse. You would see no movement. You might feel no pulse, and you might assume the person was gone. Except lightning can produce a particularly confusing sequence inside the body. A major medical review explained that lightning can cause the heart to stop suddenly while breathing can also stop because the nervous system and respiratory muscles have been disrupted. In some cases, the heart's automatic rhythm can return before normal breathing does. That creates a narrow window. If another person begins helping immediately, survival can sometimes be possible. Today, that means CPR, rescue breathing, emergency transport, and cardiac monitoring. For an ancient human, there was none of that. There was only the group. The people beside you imagine you are lying on the ground after the strike. Your body has been thrown backward. Your muscles may be temporarily paralyzed. Your hearing may be damaged. Your skin may show strange branching patterns called Lichtenberg figures, which can appear after lightning exposure and usually fade rather than becoming permanent scars. Your companions would have had no scientific explanation for any of this, but they did have something else. They had experience caring for injured members of their group. At Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan, archaeologists found Neanderthal remains dating roughly 45,000 years ago. Some individuals had severe injuries and physical limitations, and the site has become central to debates about Neanderthal care and social behavior. The evidence does not prove that Neanderthals performed organized medical treatment, but it does show something important. Some prehistoric humans survived serious physical problems long enough for their skeletons to heal. That means survival was not always an individual achievement. Sometimes your survival depended on what other people did when you could no longer do anything yourself, and lightning creates exactly that kind of situation. But there was another problem. Even if you survived the electrical event, you still had to survive everything that came afterward. A lightning strike can cause burns, it can cause neurological damage, it can throw you into the ground, it can ignite nearby vegetation, and it can injure you through objects hit by the strike itself. Medical reviews describe everything from cardiac arrest to blunt trauma, burns, nervous system damage, and secondary injuries. For an ancient hunter, that changes the story completely. You are not simply recovering from an electrical shock. You may be unable to walk. You may be confused. You may have damaged hearing or vision, and the group still has to find food, still has to protect itself, still has to move, still has to survive the night. This is where archaeology gives us another clue. At Chesawanja in Kenya, researchers reported evidence of fire associated with hominin occupation dating to more than 1.42 million years ago. The study was published in Nature in 1981 by researchers including J. Gowlett and J.W.K. Harris at Swartkrans Cave in South Africa. Burnt bones from deposits roughly 1.5 million years old provided early evidence consistent with hominin use of fire. The findings were reported by CK, Brain, and A. Sillant in 1988. And in 2025, researchers reported even stronger evidence from Barnham in southern England, dating to around 400,000 years ago, that Neanderthals deliberately produced fire using materials capable of creating sparks. You can therefore picture an ancient group that already understood fire, shelter, and cooperation, but you cannot automatically assume they understood lightning. Those are two completely different abilities. A human can learn how to control fire without understanding why the sky produces electricity, and that distinction matters. Because when the storm finally passes, your group faces a problem that has nothing to do with understanding the sky. You have to decide what to do with the person who is still lying on the ground. The storm has passed. The thunder is moving farther away, but the person on the ground still has not moved. You crouch beside them. There is no ambulance coming. No doctor is running toward you. No machine can tell you whether their heart is beating normally. And yet, this moment may have been less hopeless than it looked. Modern lightning research shows that many victims survive. The National Weather Service estimates that roughly 90% of people struck by lightning survive, although survivors can experience serious long-term effects. The strange part is that the danger does not necessarily end when the lightning disappears. A survivor can develop neurological problems. Memory can be affected. Nerves can be damaged. Some survivors report persistent pain, weakness, sleep problems, or difficulty concentrating. So imagine surviving the flash, only to wake up unable to understand why your body no longer feels normal. For an ancient human, that would have created an even deeper mystery. The body was not the only thing that had to survive. Your group would have another problem: food. If you were a hunter, you could no longer hunt. If you were responsible for carrying supplies, you could no longer carry them. If the group was moving between camps, you might slow everyone down. This is where prehistoric survival becomes surprisingly social. At Shanidar Cave, researchers found evidence of Neanderthals who lived with significant injuries and physical limitations. One famous individual, Shanidar I, had multiple injuries and abnormalities, including damage to the right side of the body and a severely impaired arm. The individual survived long enough for some of these injuries to heal. That does not prove exactly how the group cared for him, but it demonstrates something powerful. Someone with serious physical limitations could survive in a prehistoric environment. That survival would have required more than individual strength. It would have required other humans. Food had to be available, shelter had to be maintained, danger had to be managed, and someone had to remain close enough to help. This changes how you should picture prehistoric life. The strongest person did not necessarily survive alone. Sometimes, survival meant being useful to someone who could no longer protect themselves. And then there is the lightning itself. There is another misconception. You might imagine lightning as something that humans could simply avoid by staying inside a cave. But prehistoric landscapes were not always surrounded by safe shelters. Hunter-gatherers moved through open environments. They crossed rivers. They followed animals. They traveled between camps, and storms could arrive faster than anyone expected. Today, the National Weather Service warns that lightning can strike outside the area where heavy rain is falling. The familiar phrase is simple: when thunder roars, go indoors. An ancient human had no such rule. They only had experience. They could observe dark clouds. They could hear thunder. They could see lightning. They could learn that certain weather patterns meant danger, but learning that a storm is dangerous is not the same as understanding electricity. And that distinction may explain why lightning could have been such a powerful natural phenomenon for early humans. Not because we can prove exactly what they believed. We cannot. There is no prehistoric text explaining their interpretation. But because lightning combined three things that humans have always struggled to understand: suddenness, power, and unpredictability. One moment, the landscape was normal. The next, the sky exploded. A tree could split. A fire could appear. A person could collapse. And then, seconds later, everything could become quiet again. What really changed? The lightning itself did not change. The human body did not suddenly become immune to it. The electrical discharge was still dangerous thousands of years ago. What changed was everything surrounding the event. Today, you have weather forecasts, you have lightning detection, you have emergency medicine, you have CPR, you have defibrillators, you have doctors who understand cardiac arrest and neurological injury. An ancient human had none of those things, but they had something that mattered long before modern medicine existed: other humans. The archaeological record repeatedly shows that prehistoric humans were not simply isolated individuals fighting nature alone. They lived in groups. They shared resources. They occupied shelters. They controlled fire. And at some sites, people survived injuries that would have made independent survival extremely difficult. So if an ancient human was struck by lightning, we cannot honestly tell you exactly what their tribe did next. There is no fossil that preserves that moment. There is no ancient eyewitness account. There is no archaeological inscription saying what happened. But science can tell us something more interesting. The lightning could have stopped a heart. It could have caused paralysis. It could have caused burns or neurological damage. And yet, survival was possible. Which means the most important question may never have been whether the ancient human was strong enough to survive the strike. It may have been whether someone else was there when they fell, because long before hospitals, ambulances, and emergency rooms existed, one of humanity's oldest survival technologies was already around you: another human being.